I'm a sophomore, and this is for all three of you. Can you say in one sentence or less what... you know what I mean. Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Diversity and opportunity.
Lewis?
Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
Will?
The New York Jets.
No, I'm going to hold you to an answer on that. What makes America the greatest country in the world?
Well, Lewis and Sharon said it. Diversity and opportunity and freedom and freedom.
I'm not letting you go back to the airport without answering the question.
People scrolling by. Hopefully we have a great topic today. I think we do. I also hope that we do get some MAGA people on the line that can tell me.
Well, our Constitution is a masterpiece. James Madison was a genius. The Declaration of Independence.
Just let people join and we kill the music. And if everyone can confirm, always have to do these audio checks when we're starting a live. If you're joining the live, if you can let me know, just give me a thumbs up in the comments if you can hear me clearly, and we'll go from there. I think we're going to do a lot of Q&As today with quite a few guests. So hopefully if you are someone that wants to answer this question, and if we don't have enough people waiting, I don't care if it comes from MAGA. It could be liberals, it could be independents, it could be libertarians, it could be progressives, it could be regular conservatives. Wherever you sit on the political spectrum, you're welcome to come online as a guest and answer this question, because I really want to know, instead of, as a fierce independent, I never want to demonize anyone. Everyone has their feelings, but I have some thoughts on why MAGA, if they get their way, if they get all the things that they think they're getting from Trump, and MAGA gets their way, and MAGA gets more control over our government long term. And does that mean Trump gets more control? Does he run for a third term? Does that even happen? Would MAGA accept that? Or does MAGA splinter and move away from Trump, like they have with the Epstein list to some degree? So these are all things that I kind of want to know directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak, as they say. So as more and more people are joining this live, so MAGA, what do you think the outcome will be for America if you get your way? Explain to me what America becomes and how your life is better. Seriously, I want to know. Is it at all, like someone just mentioning there, Madame, all white nation? Is it a all Christian nation? Is that what you want? That's curious. If that's what you want, I certainly want to know if that's the case. So is it an all white nation? Is it all Christian nation? Is it something in between? Like, where's the end game? Where do you think it actually could end before it gets to something that completely doesn't resemble any sort of representative democracy? Like, do you think it's just going to stop? And at some point soon, where you still have, sort of the inklings of a representative democracy with sort of an authoritarian ruler, do you think it actually can stop there? I have some thoughts on that. You're right. Maybe they don't care. But the thing is, don't think many people actually think about these things. And instead of just calling anyone out or debating them, I want to know, what do they think is actually going to happen? Like, where does this end? What's the end game? Because if you think about representative democracy and the Constitution and what the founding fathers set up, it's sort of this thing in between fascism and communism, right? So you have these opposite spectrums of the political spectrum: severe, full, pure communism on the left, and obviously fascism all the way to the right. And the representative democracy is obviously sort of right in the middle. It's a liberal democracy. Take that word liberal lightly, with capitalism, right? It's a capitalistic liberal democracy. That's what the Constitution, the law of the land, is essentially is. Sort of in between, right? Where you have instead of fascism, where you have this really powerful leader, cult of personality, which is pure fascism. And of course, authoritarianism would be a little bit further inwards. And then on the other side, you'd have pure communism, right? And obviously, a representative democracy is supposed to be the best of everything, not the best of everything, actually, the only great, purest form of self rule that's relatively new in terms of humanity is self rule is relatively new, and democracy is always meant to be an experiment. Oh, cool. Thanks for that. Thanks for that pop up, and thanks for the likes as more and more people are joining. So that's my thought on that. So, we have this representative democracy that everyone, all reasonable people, right and left, have used to just fight for their constitution, this experiment, this great experiment, which is representative democracy in a constitutional republic. And everyone used to be generally in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. Issues were different, but there was no one would dare suggest, other than complete fringe groups, would suggest that our constitutional republic shouldn't exist. And that's what we're seeing today. And I saw it in my last live, and thanks for people already waiting in the queue. That's what I saw in my last live. Actually, people suggesting that democracy has run its course, get used to it, and accept it. I mean, that was literally, and it was a very clear viewpoint by this individual. He was very intelligent, very well thought out, but his theory was that no empire has lasted more than 300 years. And we're about 250 years. And that it just has to end, right? We just have to accept it. It has to end. It's just no way it's going to continue. And I called bullshit on that, right? That's bullshit. That's all dependent on its society. If its society lets it die, and why now? Like, there's no reason we can't go another 300 years and another 300 years. It's all up to the people. But if you let people, evil people, or people with extreme power and control, they'll continue to try and strip away the power from the people, which most people realize that in practice today, we're not much of a representative democracy. We're more of a corporatocracy, where corporations or a few individuals, a plutocracy, where control most of the government, where our representation represents them more than it does the people. So that's sort of my opening. We got a lot of people in here now, which is awesome. Now we're going to take some calls. So I really want to know, and I hope that everyone stays in here and listens to some of these responses, no matter where they come from: MAGA, liberals, libertarians, progressives, conservatives, whatnot. So if you're going to join and give me your points of view on this, I'd ask you to please let me know what generation you are at least. So generation, if you're a boomer, generation X, generation Y, which is millennial, or a Gen Zer. It'd be awesome to have more Gen Zers here. We have about 50% of my audience is men and 50% of the audience is women. And then when it comes to generations, the majority of the generation is Gen X, with millennials and boomers as well. But Gen Z is the most important group in the country right now. And I know people might argue with that, but they're the ones growing up with the social media generation and the disinformation impacting them the most. And our future is going to be really dependent. It includes millennials. Our future is going to be highly dependent on Gen Z, and that's why I like to have a lot of Gen Z people in here. So hopefully Gen Z will find this channel. People that are in this live will be able to tell other Gen Zers that, hey, maybe you should listen to this Gen Xer. He has some valid thoughts on the state of the world and the state of our politics, and I would love to have more Gen Zers in here. So, all right, so let's go to a couple of questions. I'm going to usually give about 2 minutes. So whoever joins as a guest, let's not make it too long. I actually have these pretty cool timers that I'm going to try out, so don't get too freaked out about it. You're going to hear a little beep go off when you start. So let's test it like this. That'll be the start, and then there'll be the end, which will be a double beep. Don't get too freaked out about it. I'm not going to cut you off at exactly 2 minutes, but I'd like to keep these thoughts to around 2 minutes at the most. You can go a little bit over if you're finishing your thought, but obviously I'm trying to keep these debates or these questions so we can get a lot of people in here and give their points of view, and that we can all learn from each of our perspectives on what does MAGA expect will be the outcome. So let me read a couple of comments, and then we got a couple of people in here waiting to join. We got Leroy Jenkins, you're going to be up first, and then Wignatty, you're up seconds, and I'll get you in here just a moment. I just want to catch up on a couple of comments. All right, I want to point out one comment from Kelly Kool-Aid. I'm a boomer. If the Democrats and Liberal Party don't get serious enough about our future, we're done. As a fierce independent, I understand why you have that view. I don't necessarily have that view because I think both parties are so demonized and so corrupted that just moving back and forth this pendulum, left versus right, is never really going to solve anything. We have to bring people together from both sides. You may have your thoughts that it'd be better to be blue than MAGA right now. I certainly wouldn't argue that. But long term, when you really want a true outcome of what's best for America, we're going to need to do something different, much more transformational, that still works within the confines of our constitutional republic. So that's my thought on that. And that's why I'll always point out people who are saying we need more red, we need more blue. I think it's garbage both ways. It's just a distraction to divide and conquer us, that every time we get to election, you only have two choices, blue and red. And that is the reality today. We do have just two choices, but it doesn't mean it has to be the reality. You just have to go back to 1992 to realize it doesn't have to be the reality if you had 50 to 70 million people. So that's the intro. We got enough people in here now. We're going to go to our first person. Leroy, you're going to be up. Keep it civil or you get kicked. Welcome, Leroy.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for joining. So can you state what generation you're at? Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I'm a millennial.
Excellent. Welcome. And what was the other question I wanted from you, everyone? Your generation, obviously, where you sit on the political spectrum.
So I voted for Trump. Having said that, I'm not really too happy with this administration. And I'm willing to explain that, as well as what I think, what America becomes, how my life gets better, right? From what I want to see.
Okay, great. You got about 2 minutes. I'm not going to hold you exactly to it. I just want to test some of these audio effects. So as you're saying, I'm going to start you now. 2 minutes. If you can bring it down to concise it in 2 minutes, let me know your thoughts.
I'll be pretty quick. Yeah.
Right.
So basically, what I think is we got a crazy political problem in America here. I think that America needs to get down just to a baseline. I think that the people that are here illegally that shouldn't be here, right? Unfortunately, they need to leave. And we need to kind of get this baseline back to where just Americans are in America. I think that, we need to effectively immediately ban dual citizens from holding any form of power, whether that's in local government, Congress, the presidency, whatever, right? Like right now, I think we have a major issue where we have a bunch of dual citizens that are holding positions of power and they're creating laws in America.
Let me just ask you one question there. Are there any, because I don't know if this is true, are there any people in positions of power that not born in American? They may be dual citizenships, but they were born as Americans, natural Americans.
Ian Omar is one of them.
Okay.
And I'm not just trying to pick on her. I mean, there's tons of more problems too. But I just think it's a major problem. Like we need to, what I want to see that happens in America, right, is we need to promote, just Americans sticking up for Americans. And I feel like right now what we're seeing is a completely different thing, especially in this administration. I feel like Trump, I voted for him to be American first, and I feel like I'm not getting that. I feel like Trump is more concerned with creating beachfront property in Gaza rather than, what we're actually dealing with here. So I'll end there.
No, you almost timed it perfectly because you're going to hear the double beep in about 2 seconds here.
Okay, cool.
So let me just ask you a question regarding, so immigration was the main topic there. So are you under the impression that people on the left, most normal, let's say moderate liberals, would not agree, would agree with you, or you think they disagree? You think that they should want sort of this open borders, which was never a thing, but you think they're okay with sort of this more unlimited or more open
Yeah, I
immigration?
absolutely think that they're okay with it, and I think that if the most TikTok lives that you go into, they will say that.
Okay. Well, are you familiar that Obama, for an example, deported 3 million immigrants during his term, which was at the same rate as what Trump's on currently?
Obama actually deported more than the current rate that Trump's on.
Yeah, it's close.
Uh,
It's pretty close, I think, right?
yes, I am aware of that. Having said that, I think that the liberal Democratic Party has evolved since Obama's been in office. I don't believe that it, like for instance, like Obama also was a huge drone striker. You know what I mean? Like Obama's track record with his casualty count, it like I don't know that a modern day Democrat would agree with that.
Right. And there's a great comment right here from Gen X that says, I've never met anyone who wants open borders. I agree. I haven't either. I've never heard it other than some really fringe people ever talk about open borders. That was more of a rallying cry on the right, suggesting or trying to imply that people on the left wanted open borders, but there was never, ever such legislation. And even you have to remember when it comes to immigration, that the Biden administration last 2 years ago had a very comprehensive border policy in place that Trump basically killed and told the Republicans to kill. You remember that? So I would just say I disagree that the vast majority of moderate people in independents, which are 75 million, and most liberals that are moderate would also probably agree with you, even though you might see things differently on social media. I would suggest that most Americans would agree that if you're here illegally, that something has to happen. They either need to leave or they need to go through the process legally. That's just my
I
thoughts.
I hear what you're saying, and I want to believe that, but I've seen slogans like "No life is illegal" and all these, different things. Like it to say that like, there isn't a big movement saying that illegal immigrants here deserve to be here because they pay taxes and all that kind of stuff. Like I don't know. Like I respectfully, I disagree that there's not a large portion
Well,
of
there
people.
is a large portion that also think that if you are here and you're not a criminal and you are being productive, there needs to be some sort of process to legalize you because immigration is truly important to our economy. So there is a faction and a large faction that does agree with that as well.
Yeah. So I mean, that can be interpreted different ways, right? Because if someone came here illegally, whether or not they're just a farmer that maybe isn't a criminal or not, there's a conversation to be had that technically they are a criminal for being here illegally.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where I'm at though. I kind of just want to get America back to a baseline. Like I read a statistic that there's 50 million 50 million civilians here on visas currently. To me, that's a crazy amount. Like I had no idea it was that.
I don't 50 million, that would be 1 out of every 7 people in America. I'm not can't validate it or not, but it sounds absurd. It doesn't sound factual. It doesn't sound it's even possibly remotely factual. But
Right.
we'd have to look it up.
Hmm.
Okay, I would leave you with just one thing. Thanks for your viewpoint. So it was a great viewpoint. We talked mostly about immigration. I don't like to necessarily get into individual issues because I like to stay more on the principle level because we're talking about an issue here, and this one happened to be immigration. But I would suggest to you and everybody else on both the left or right is that we keep fighting over these. They are important issues, but they're not nearly as important as the corruption by billionaires, special interests, and corporations, and how the ultra wealthy or the people at the top are taking over our system of government and our representatives represent them and not us. That is far more principle of an issue. And as long as like when you jumped on the line, which is great, and we talked about an issue, my suggestion is these issues are here to divide us. There are solutions to all these issues. And if we stop fighting each other or punching sideways and start punching upwards and realize that there are all types of forces and powerful people at the top that are getting us to be divided over issues when they're really when they're responsible for taking away our democracy. So
I
we'll
fully
leave with
agree.
that.
I fully agree with you. It's it's a saying that has always been said. It's they're two wings of the same bird.
Hmm.
It's exactly what it is. And whether you get Trump or you get Kamala, Biden, George W. Bush, doesn't matter. You're gonna get basically the same results, and that's the people at the top, that are controlling everything.
So
So
my message to you and everybody would please spread the message that if there were 50 to 70 million people that truly wanted to eliminate corruption from government and replace all career politicians from both parties, it sounds impossible. I know it sounds crazy because everything is blue versus red these days, but it's not. It's constitutionally possible. So let's not fight each other. Let's fight the people that are actually trying to steal our rights and make us divided. So thanks for joining. Appreciate your viewpoint.
thanks, man. Yep.
Thanks. See you. Okay, I know if you watch these lives, you'll hear me with similar expressions on that. So that one, we got a little bit down into the weeds with immigration. We didn't stay enough, probably my fault, that we didn't stay enough on what does America look like if MAGA gets their way. The last caller, last guest, of course, that wasn't happy with the Trump administration's direction, but he did vote for Trump, and we ended up going down this immigration, thoughts on immigration. So thanks for joining. That was really still nonetheless very interesting. We have Wignatty, you're up next. You're going to be joining. Keep it civil. Let me know, MAGA, what do you think the outcome will be for America if you get your way? Explain to me what becomes of America and how your life is better. Wignatty, it looks like didn't join. I'm going to go to DY Little Gina. Let's go to you next. And if anyone wants to join as a guest and try and answer that question, you don't have to be MAGA to answer that question. I prefer if you're MAGA, but when you join, please let me know your where you sit on the political spectrum and your generation, please. Welcome.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I am a millennial. I would call myself MAGA adjacent rather than sort of tribal MAGA, if I had to. So if I were to get my way, America would return to, would have the principle of history and tradition from the founding era applied to every single amendment, not just the second, and that would be applied universally across every inferior court, to the tune of basically, unless the government can prove that an action is constitutional and is in accordance with the history, tradition, and text of the Constitution, they automatically lose. So that would look like a pretty good world to me because it would preserve freedom rather than security. And freedom is infinitely preferable to security because all security does is concentrate power in the hands of a group of people who one day will use it against you.
So if you can go a little deeper, what is your America look like? So what does that America look like to you if that were to be in place? Like, what are the big changes? Name just maybe one or two changes or how it would look.
For sure. So I think first things first, you would need to go back to the representational proportions of the founding era to avoid having such an easily bought and paid for Congress, right? It's a lot harder to bribe around 10,000 people than to bribe 500 people.
Okay. Well, we have a representative democracy, though, right? Or 436 federal positions, right? So that was part of the founding era as well.
Well, the 436 was not.
Right.
It's important to note that initially there was discussion over whether you should have a fixed proportionality of representation, right? Like whether there's a great debate over whether or not you should say we should have one representative for every 10,000 people in perpetuity. And I think it's a crying shame that got left out of the Constitution.
Right. Well, that was one. It sounds like to me, I'm not too familiar on that specific aspect, but the founding fathers debated if they should have a direct democracy, a representative democracy, and all the other forms of government. They thought about everything, right? So, but at the end of the day, they chose where we have 2 senators. Well, it ended up evolving where we have 2 senators in every state, and we have representation, X amount of representation per state based on how many the population. So you want that to change?
No, I want the way that that representation is capped to change so that it is necessarily one representative for every 10,000 people. So, for example, in like the state of Maryland that has 8 million people, right now I think they have, I want to say it's either 6 or 8 representatives. But if they have one for every 10,000 people, you're talking 10 for every 100,000, 100 for every million. So you'd have 800 reps. Each one of them would actually report to a small town sized group of constituents.
Okay.
They would be
let me ask
more
you.
accountable on that level.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just to keep it a little streamlined. You mentioned corruption earlier. So whether it's one representation from 10,000 or it's the existing format, how does that really impact corruption? Like, because you mentioned corruption, so I'm assuming you would believe as well that the corruption of money by various forces is a huge problem, right? So really, what does it matter? That, like, you could parse different forms, but if they're all viable to be corrupted, does it really matter?
Well, so it's harder to bribe 1,000 people than 100 people, right?
I would say I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that, and you could just go to Switzerland. Like, direct democracy is something the founders considered, where every citizen votes on every issue. And if you look what Elon Musk did in Michigan, essentially you could bribe people, even though it might be, I don't know if harder is the right word, even though it might be more complex to bribe X amount of people in a geographic region, it would be also much harder to police it. So in theory, I would argue that if you wanted to monitor corruption, it's much easier to monitor corruption of 435 people plus 100 than it is every American citizen, which could easily be bribed by the amount of wealth that's in this country now by certain individuals. Those people could, in targeted areas, could certainly be bribed by a various form of influences, not necessarily just money. So that's just my point. That's just my counterpoint.
That's fair. My point is more that in terms of the resources you would have to expend for that influence, you're expending more resources for the influence, right? Like,
maybe
if you want to bribe people to get majority in Congress right now, you'd have to pay 200-ish, 218 people-ish to get to get the majority that you need.
Yeah.
If the number of congressmen is 100 times that, you would have to bribe 20,000 people.
I would say there's ways to manipulate masses of people, like fascism and authoritarianism and communism has done it in the past. There's ways to manipulate people with a lot less expenditure. So that's just my point of view.
And that, to me, would be an argument against direct democracy, right?
True. That could be an argument against direct democracy as well. Absolutely.
The other argument that I would put forward against direct democracy would be, right now, status quo, we actually don't have representation of the state governments. Right now, we just have 2 popularly elected houses, which is not actually how we were set up and hasn't been working out so great, because the purpose of the Senate originally was to represent the interests of the several states, in that those might differ from the people living in the states.
Right.
So right now we just have, the smaller group of people directly elected by the people and the larger group of people directly elected by the people.
Right.
And so I think another important thing is to bring back that balancing of interests, which you lose in a direct democracy, because then it is simply a tyranny of the population centers, which historically has not turned out very well for the rural people or the urban people, when the rural people get fed up with it and have a peasants' revolt.
Right. Well, I appreciate your point of view. I know we're getting down into the weeds, and that's my fault for letting us get there. I want to try and keep it a little bit high level, but I appreciate your perspective very much. Thanks for joining.
For sure.
Thanks. See ya. Okay, I want to answer this question because I love this. I love this comment. So Dennis Dempsey 410, America is a republic. I'll give you about 30 seconds to reply to that. See if you actually believe if because I know where you're going with that, or I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with that. And I'm going to tell you straight up, Dennis Dempsey 410, America is a republic. You are wrong. That is not true. You've been manipulated. You've been hearing that for a particular purpose. And you may or may not know what that is. So maybe if you want to comment a little further that America is a republic. Who on here thinks that America is a republic? Quote, republic. That's it. And what does that mean? Because this one is something that I've seen now for the past 10 or 20 years, that America is a republic. Do you believe that or do you not believe it? Because I'm going to tell you why or why not. Thank you, Dennis. So enlighten me. All right. So America is not a republic. America, the United States of America, is a constitutional republic. And you may not separate the word constitutional from a republic because the meanings of those two things are very different. No, I'm not a Democrat, Dennis. So again, sort of your lack of knowledge and wisdom is showing itself. I am a fierce independent. I have many conservative values. So you can try and proclaim that I'm a Democrat, but again, you're showing that maybe you don't have the depth of knowledge on this topic. So America is a representative democracy, first and foremost, which is a constitutional republic. And that means that all constitutional republics, it's a small circle, are always representative democracies. So a constitutional republic is within a representative democracy. And when you hear people talking about we're a republic, because they don't like the word democrat or democracy in that term, representative democracy. A republic does not have to be a democracy whatsoever. And that is exactly why when you hear people on the right saying we're a republic, we're not a constitutional representative democracy, they're wrong. And they're trying to sow the doubts that we don't even have to be a democracy. Because people like you that say we're a republic, the other thing they also say is, well, democracy is not listed in the Constitution. That word is nowhere in the Constitution. That is a ridiculous statement that, again, people are using to manipulate you to thinking that we're not a democracy and that we're a republic. Well, the Bible in the scriptures or in the early stages up until the last, I forget how many years, there's no mention of the name Bible on the Bible. Now there is, of course. Your birth certificate does not say human. So just because the word democracy is not in the Constitution doesn't mean we're not a representative democracy. We certainly, well, technically, we are a representative democracy. We may not be acting like it in practice, and we are a constitutional republic. And again, you have to remember, all constitutional republics are representative democracies. It's as black and white as that. So when you hear, if I didn't explain that clearly, when you hear people just saying the word we're a republic, that is seeding the sows of doubt that we do not have to be a democracy. So when people like Peter Thiel and other billionaires stand up and say we don't even have to be a democracy, it's okay. The Constitution doesn't mean we have to be a democracy. It is a flat out lie and a manipulation of people who don't want to learn it. And I understand it's complicated. It's not that simple. But that's the truth. All you have to do is understand the comprehension of the meaning of a representative democracy and a constitutional republic. And realize that those people who just spitting out the word we're a republic, there's a motive behind it. And that motive is to convince you that, hey, maybe this constitutional thing, maybe this constitution thing, it's really not that great. Maybe this democracy thing is really not true at all. Maybe we're not even a democracy. It's not true at all. They're just getting you to think that so that when somebody decides to stay in power longer than the Constitution calls for, you have an excuse to say, oh, I used to support freedom of speech. I used to support the Constitution. I used to support the Second Amendment and all the other amendments and the 7 articles of the Constitution. And then you start doubting it. And then, well, you're not an American at all. then you end up becoming a traitor. It's just that simple. You're not an American and you're not a patriot if you're someone that starts to spew that information. So that's a heart to heart. Learn the comprehension, learn the definitions, just don't repeat shit that you hear from people who are trying to manipulate you and actually take power away from you or divide us between red and blue. So that's a little bit of my thoughts on that matter. Now, we don't have anyone waiting in the queue. So if anyone wants to answer the question, MAGA, what do you think the outcome of America will be if you get your way? Explain to me what America becomes and how your life is better, especially that one. How is your life better if MAGA continues to take more control and we continue to go where we're losing our constitutional freedoms? Some people may disagree with that. There's certainly been, there's an incredible amount of data that's being collected on all Americans right now that's out in the open, whether it's after the Charlie Kirk shooting or before that. AI and Palantir are spying on all Americans, probably spying on us right here. So over time. So that's the thoughts. So if anyone wants to join, we do have someone that's in the queue now. It's going to be Fei. Again, please keep it civil. I'm going to try and keep this down to 2 minutes. I'm doing a bad job with that. So you're going to hear a beep when we start. Let me know, what does America look like? Please let me know your political affiliation on the spectrum and what generation you are. And that'll help the audience get more perspective on who we're speaking with. Hi there, Faye.
I did vote for Trump every single time he went to campaign. I have a question for you, though. What makes you think all MAGA want him to run in 2028? Because he's already said he won't. So what makes you think all MAGA want him to run in 2028?
I don't know if that's true or not. He's implied that he may. He's actually suggested he may run for a third. He'll wait and see.
They'd have to change the Constitution to let him do that, and that's a very hard thing to do.
Oh, is it really hard to do? They just tried to cancel Jimmy Kimmel from free speech, so I would argue it's really not that hard to do.
Well, that's because Jimmy Kimmel's a jerk. And
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you think he's a jerk or not. It's a simple principle and value that we have freedom of speech, and the government is not supposed to get involved in that. So you could easily argue that he violated the Constitution. I wouldn't be even arguing it. It's a fact. He violated the Constitution by having government get involved to terminate the contract. You don't have to like Jimmy Kimmel. I'm indifferent, but he has a right, and the station has a right to be there. So those are facts. So
I really don't care about Jimmy Kimmel.
Okay.
I don't watch that.
Yeah, so let's say I'm not under the assumption he's going to run for a third term. I think J.D. Vance is more like, I don't think Trump will survive this term. So, but I could be wrong. And if he does...
Okay, what do you mean you don't think he'll survive this term?
I just think old age. He may not be around.
Oh, come on. He's not that old. He's in perfect health.
Okay. I'm just saying, hey, I'm just saying.
They about Biden, didn't they?
Absolutely. It's the same. I would have said the same thing about Biden. Again, I'm a fierce independent. Both of these individuals are very old, so it's very plausible, not saying it's likely, that he's not around in the next term.
I honestly think that J.D. Vance would be the excellent next president. He'd be excellent.
Well, what do you want? What do you think America looks like? So, let's start this question over and just give you 1 minute. What do you think it looks like if you continue to get your way in terms of what MAGA continues to have more and more power?
I'm not getting my way, no matter what.
Oh, okay. Why is that? Oh, that's interesting. So why do you think that?
Because in the United States, in my state in California, certain people come first, and I'm an American citizen, and I come last. So I'm not getting my way.
Well, so we're not talking state level. We're talking federal level. So what does it matter? Like, you're not getting your way with MAGA, which you should be getting your way, right? So it's interesting you say you're not getting your way.
I'm not a typical MAGA, okay? I'm not a typical MAGA. I don't agree with everything MAGA says. I don't agree with everything Trump says.
Okay.
I don't have to be 100% MAGA. I don't have to be 100% Trump.
Right. Understandable. Okay. Well, thanks for your perspective. I appreciate that very much, and thanks for joining the live.
Thank you.
Have
a good day.
You too. All right. So we got Joe Polyglot, not polygot. I wonder the difference. Are you a polygot, Joe? That's interesting. So you're going to join next. I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes again. What does the outcome of America look like if you get your way? If you are MAGA, if you're not MAGA, let me know. That's fine as well. Explain to me what America becomes and how your life is better. Welcome, Joe. And first question, are you a polyglot?
It's a polyglot. Yeah.
Is it
I speak.
5 languages?
Right now I speak 5 languages. I've spoken 8 in my life.
Wonderful.
But it's hard to maintain if you're not using them.
Of course. Well, welcome.
Yeah,
and where do you sit on this political spectrum and your generation?
Well, I'm 33.
Millennial?
I did vote for Trump this last time, but that does not connotate that everything he does I support.
Okay.
I would say I largely support the idea of making America great again. And what I see is in the future, an America that actually reinforces the middle class. I see the issue of free speech is very interesting to me because it was not Trump that went after Jimmy Kimmel. And I think that what the FCC chairman said was inappropriate, but that was the free market acting because it was Sinclair and Nexstar, private companies, that chose to push and take his show off the air.
Well, I'm going to stop you just for a moment because you mentioned Trump blew up that theory yesterday by claiming that he might go after them again.
Trump says a lot of things, but unless he actually files legal action, and actually these companies, because these companies have a special license, they're considered common carriers, so they actually are adherent to the federal government. It's not like Comedy Central. It's not like Fox News.
Yeah, but come on, reality here. You're living in the clouds to think that the government was not involved and the Trump administration was not directly involved in wanting to silence Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, if you don't believe that, we're not going to come to any
two things. I study constitutional law at Berkeley. So I'm going to tell you right now that these are considered common carriers. They have a greater duty of care and obligation to not engage what we would call biased political propaganda because they have essentially a greater duty of care to do what's best for society. But I also point to this great deal of censorship that took place under the Biden regime, where it just came out that they were pushing.
Why do you use the
Facebook.
term regime? Why would you even use that term? I mean, that's
Biden administration. Would you use the term Trump regime?
No, I don't use either. I don't use the Trump regime.
You got to let me talk. You keep interrupting me.
Of course, I'm going to call you out on something. If I hear you something that sounds outrageous, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to correct you.
It's not outrageous. Administration, regime, those are semantical, obviously synonyms.
And they're meant to discredit anyone, right? It's meant to discredit the administration.
So whether or not it's an administration regime is a moot point. The point is that I was censored, and I saw exactly how alarming it was to have my viewpoint censored online during the last 4 years. And the future I see a federal government that doesn't do things like push censorship through private companies, where you have this backdoor revolving agreement where there's essentially these private companies were acting as quasi-federal agents, which that's actually very unconstitutional. And that's actually a huge threat to our democracy. What else do I see?
Can I just hold you? I have a question on that. So are you implying also, so you're in agreement with me, so TikTok is essentially being awarded by the federal government to a group of investors. Is that one of your fears?
I think the whole TikTok situation, I don't have strong views on it because obviously I think that it's the same thing with APAC. You can't have a company operating in the United States that's essentially beholden to a foreign government, right?
I agree with that. Understandable as well. But I'm just suggesting because you have the government awarding who controls the TikTok algorithm in the United States to a bunch of individuals that are basicing currying favor to Trump or Trump supporters.
Well,
so what's the difference? What's the difference between China having oversight of TikTok or a certain group of political individuals with political beliefs taking over the algorithm? Like, is there much difference?
Here's my question for you. Which company right now controls the TikTok algorithm? Do you know?
It's hard to know. Well, ByteDance would be, but you do. No, of course we don't know.
No, that changed hands. It's actually Oracle. I live in Austin, Texas, and it's Oracle. And under the new agreement, it's going to continue to be Oracle. So this idea that somehow, who is it? The guy at Fox News? I can't remember exactly.
It's Murdoch's son, Michael Dell. and Oracle, which is not Oracle, it's really Larry Ellison. Let's be real.
Right. So
Yeah,
they're gonna have a majority interest in the new company under the proposed deal, but unless they do something within the board level to switch control from Oracle, the actual control of the TikTok algorithm is not going to change hands.
okay. I've
So
done a lot of research on the topic. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I know you're in Texas, but that doesn't mean you know who controls the algorithm. Oracle does, I believe, host a lot of the cloud infrastructure. Of course, do many companies throughout the world. But ByteDance has been known to control the algorithm in the United States.
no, so that actually changed 2 years ago.
Okay,
You can
I can
Google
look that
that.
up. Yeah, I'll look that up. I'm not going to say that you're lying
So
here. I
Oracle,
don't know. I don't know.
all the proprietary data switched from ByteDance to Oracle. They host the servers, and then there's also the question of whether or not Oracle outsources. Because I've seen that to be the case, where some of the moderators that they're hiring are not actually in the United States, but rather outsourced to places like India. So
Okay.
there's two mechanisms within TikTok algorithm that allow censorship. One is that they have an automatic AI, and that's allegedly controlled by Oracle. And then, depending on what the quote unquote violation of terms of service is, then they actually send that to a moderator. And I've had to threaten legal action against TikTok because I've been censored on here. And like I was military intelligence for 10 years and I studied constitutional law. So I know that when I'm saying something that it's not misinformation, but I found myself heavily censored based on certain topics that I'm talking about, which usually go into the meta topic of TikTok and
Well, you don't have
who owns them.
just like I do here. You don't have a right to broadcast your free speech through a private corporation like TikTok. You don't have that right.
So this is actually a novel legal area because they've declared that the social media companies are not responsible for the free speech of individuals. And then there's
You have
also
private
this
media companies that aren't registered as media companies. They're not under the same
right.
laws as media companies are. So they have a
There's
lot
there's
more
currently legal
latitude.
cases. There's also currently legal cases uh, being adjudicated that are going to set a precedent because the argument is because these companies are so large that they are now the public square where people are communicating. So just like a common carrier, they also have a certain level of responsibility in order to. So just like a utility company, just like an internet service provider, uh, isn't allowed to censor or um, throttle data to certain companies like YouTube because they don't like what they're communicating. There's also novel legal theory, and we'll see that adjudicated over the next probably 3 or 4 years
Okay.
because I mean it's coming. That was going through both the Biden admin, but it's also being pushed by the Trump admin through the uh, what is it, SEC, basically antitrust action. I can't remember the woman's name. She's an Asian woman. You could also Google that, but she was the one who took the lawsuit out against Google. So hopefully we'll see some movement on that. I don't know if that's going to actually occur, but I do think that if we want a free society, then you can't have it can't be we can't have power centralized at the federal government, but we certainly can't have it centralized in private companies,
Right.
corporations. I
Okay.
think you would agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to live in company towns where the mechanisms are so complex that they're controlling what speech we have, they control what information we have, they're employing us,
That's
and then
just
we're
like
also buying their products.
the federal broadcast laws in terms of spectrum in the early days of if you're a network station that you have to abide by certain conditions and rules and regulations. Those have to be applied equally without political influence. And the problem, I think you would agree that what's happening with social media and government getting involved, and whether you're right or left or independent, and you have to worry about your speech being suppressed based on whoever is in control of government is dangerous. I don't think you would argue
Right.
with that. Okay.
I know I would not. And I would say that there's people who are Republican, which I'm not a Republican, that are anti free speech. And I see that on the left as well. And I think that for a large part, they work together and they censor when the Democrats are in power based on ideology. They don't like when Republicans talking, and now we see that happening on the Republican side against Democrats,
Well,
and I don't like
we're all
that
being
either.
pushed to fight against each other when we really know there's influences from the corruption from special interests, corporations, billionaires, including foreign governments. is having dramatic impact and on all these issues. And it's not about left or right, but we're of course arguing about some left versus right sort of issues here. But that's not the real problem, right? The problem is
I
that
personally try to avoid that. I
right,
personally don't view the world in binary terms or
great,
through a dichotomy or a dialectic. But what I will say is that what I see coming out of the Democrat Party is very, very, other than those who are, kind of in the category of they lean towards the Green Party, they're socialist, those people are not in lockstep. But the Democrat Party as a whole, we've seen with their superdelegates that they're anointing candidates. They have not had a free and open primary for the last 15 years. And everything right now, that criticisms they make against, the Trump administration regarding mid-decade redistricting, that happened in 2016 in 4 different states, in California, New York.
it's
So
been happening on both sides for 30,
yeah.
40 years.
Well,
So I'm
the
going to cut you
playbook.
off. I don't want to go. We're going too deep into weeds here. I want to try and stay to this general topic that I have for this live. So otherwise, the audience is going to get bored. So
So one thing with MAGA, let me make this last
yeah,
point, is that what I see, I think that tariffs are going to be largely a good thing to bring industry back to the United States. I'm completely supportive of that. I think it's also going to reduce global warming. I think that we need to disconnect ourselves from systems of, these supply pipelines that connect us to countries like China that employ slave labor. I think that's largely a good thing. And I think that in the future, not under Trump, he's not going to pop the bubble, but we really do need to move away from money printing. We need to end the
no one's printing
petrodollar.
money. It's all digital money anyway. Okay.
Well, yeah, injection through
I appreciate
quantitative
your
easing.
thoughts. I'm
Money,
gonna.
same thing, semantics.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. I appreciate your point of view.
Okay,
Thanks.
good talking to you.
You too.
Later.
All right, just one quick response on the last caller because we got into the weeds a little bit again, talking about bringing tariffs are good at the end. And I want to mention something about tariffs are good and things can bring jobs back to America. Stop. I just say stop because we have to stop as a country, whether it's Democrat or Republican, stop changing the rules of the game. That's all. It's complete bullshit. America, once the League of Nations, after World War I, the League of Nations failed, and then we had the UN. We decided after World War II that there's going to be, we're going to try and prevent wars and we're going to solve things diplomatically. We also, as an economy, decided that free trade and globalization was a benefit to America, and it has been. And now we have one administration coming in and says, oh, we're going to change the game. This is so ridiculous because if we do this, if we change the rules that we created, like we set up the board game, globalization, capitalism, we want to ship certain jobs overseas and pay for less for them and purchase them in America. It has been an incredible win, with the exception of obviously some deficit spending, which is partially related, but not entirely related. My point is for the last caller is we set the boundaries, we set the guardrails, we set the rules of the game that all of our allies have tried to adhere to. And then we come in as the big bad bully with the $5 trillion economy and say, oh, well, wait a minute. We don't like this now. And we don't like what you're doing. And now we're going to try and punish you. And now we're punishing ourselves because there's tariffs. Tariffs have been tried in the past in a time where they may have been more successful. But now with globalization, it's completely foolish for America to decide that we're going to change the rules of the game. We're the richest, most powerful nation in the world. We have enormous responsibilities. And no one administration could be able to come in and completely change foreign policy in a period of peace and prosperity. If you want to solve the deficit, then you can tax billionaires and corporations like they used to be taxed in the 60s and the 70s, because they are stealing $3 trillion, not billion, $3 trillion a year by not paying the same level of taxes on their assets and on their income like regular Americans do. So I point this out frequently that we're a $5 trillion economy. We have $40 trillion in debt. If you wanted to solve the debt problem, you could easily solve it. All you have to do is get the people at the top to pay their fair share. You could literally generate between 2.7 and 3.2 trillion more dollars. That would only take 13 years to pay off the entire national debt if you wanted to pay off the national debt. But there's no logical reason to consider paying off the national debt. You need to reduce spending. You need to bring in more revenue. All those things are true. You could reduce the national debt, but the way the monetary system works, with the American dollar being the global reserve currency, we're an economy and an economic system that is supposed to run on debt. It's by design. It's a feature. It's not a bug. So those people that like adhere to this insanity of the national debt, they think it's such a problem. It is a problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem. Where we spend too much and we have too much fraud, but we also don't tax the people that should be contributing a massive amount of money, $3 trillion a year. It's just an enormous figure that should be happening. So I don't agree with the last caller at all in terms of some of his global viewpoints. I think he's missing a lot of sort of perspective on who set this game up. Like the American democracy and the self-rule system, or a rules-based system that we set up after World War II, has been the greatest thing that's ever happened to humanity with all of its problems. So those are facts on all those things. So that's my rant. So, but getting back to the topic, again, 2 minutes for any guest that wants to join. We've always gotten off topic, and I'm going to blame myself for that. Getting off topic, I really want to know from MAGA, if you continue to get your way, what do you think the outcome for America will be? Explain to me what America becomes and how your life is better. Because seriously, I do want to know what your life looks like. What does your life look like in terms of your ability to afford housing, your freedoms, your ability for freedom of speech, and all the constitutional amendments, even the Second Amendment, gun rights, for all those freedoms. What does America look like if you get your way? I really want to know. We have a couple people in the guest queue. TikTok user 513, you're up next. And again, let's keep it civil, please. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to explain your point of view. I'll only interrupt if I hear something that's dramatically false. So welcome. If you can hear me, I think you're coming into the room.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, welcome. If you can tell me where do you sit on the political spectrum and what's your generation? And then if you can answer the question, I think people are curious about this. I certainly am.
Yeah. So I'm 27. I would consider myself I'm socially very liberal. I think I'm fiscally conservative.
Okay.
And in terms of where this goes or what MAGA is trying to do, yeah, I totally agree with the plan. Instead of kicking the can down the road for essentially a giant service economy, the idea that they're trying to basically make happen is they'd like to bring back some type of manufacturing to the United States, similar to like in the 50s and 60s where we had these auto unions. We were making steel, we were making different things. They'd like to bring that back because what we have right now is the United States is a giant service economy. Mm-hmm. And all of those jobs are essentially being relegated to AI. They're being relegated to other countries. They're being outsourced to other countries. And so you have a massive amount of people in the United States, and you have a massive wealth inequality. There's a bunch of people who are making a lot of money, and then there is a ton of people who are making very little money, and there's really not that much in between. And so I think that they recognize that that's an issue, and I think that they think that manufacturing is essentially the way that you go about doing that. I think that that's an objectively good thing to be doing. I simply do. I don't understand when the left pushes back on that, why they hate it so much. The other thing about the immigrants.
What are they pushing back on? I'm just curious. They're pushing back just on the concept of tariffs or something else?
Yeah, they're pushing back on the concept of tariffs, but it seems like they don't actually understand that the idea behind the tariffs is to set up an economy where you can manufacture. So, for instance, without getting too deep into the woods of tariffs,
so we all understand tariffs. That there are tax on individuals today, but you're suggesting if we continue to tax, it'll end up bringing manufacturing back to America because will be able
It's
to
a
compete.
tax on imported goods.
Right.
So it's really important that you definitionally are
Of course,
aware of
yes.
what we're talking about.
I-
So if we're talking about tariffs, for instance, here's a real life practical example.
But
of how
tariffs
this
are
would
only
work.
applied on anything that's being imported, so that's implied.
That's correct. Yes. But when you say it's a tax on the consumer in general, it's a tax on the consumer through imported goods. Also, the weight of the actual increase of the tariffs, that is debated on who ends up eating the cost. For instance, if the consumers can't pay a higher cost, like they literally can't stomach the cost, the producer will have to stomach the cost, and they'll have to let that eat into their profits, because the alternative is you sell literally no product and you don't have a business. But anyway, back to a practical example of how tariffs actually help bring manufacturing back to the United States. Let's say that other countries do not have a barrier to entry, they do not have a tariff, and they can sell their goods. They can manufacture them in their country, and then they can send them over here and sell them at cost. They typically have a currency that also is not as high value as the US dollar. So manufacturing in their country, sending their product to the United States, selling it for USD, and then bringing it back to their country is essentially enriching them. I mean, it is a great business model for other countries to send their product here. So when you put a tax on imported goods, like let's say that you were to do it with cars, something like that, just a practical example to give you. If you were to put a massive import on cars that come from other countries, what would happen is overnight you would make US manufacturing viable, because you immediately have a massive leg up on any country that is sending a car here. Because if the tariff is 100% per se, you have a 100% leverage to work. And if you can produce the car in the United
I don't know if you
States-
chose the greatest example, because most car manufacturers that sell cars in America actually produce their cars in America. There are some outliers. A lot of German companies don't, but
I'm just giving you an example.
Okay.
You can apply this to any product. You understand that this is just a theoretical example into how they work.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so
All right,
replace
well,
cars.
I
with
like to
any
try and
good.
keep this to 2 minutes, so if you can just sort of,
Yeah,
let's
well,
bring
I
the
mean,
point
you
across.
you
Bring it
kind
home.
of
Bring
asked
it
a couple of
home.
questions and whatnot. So yeah, I'll bring it home. So the idea is essentially that if somebody can manufacture in another country, send it here, and there's no barrier to entry, usually they can manufacture everything cheaper because their economy is operating on a currency that is literally not as valuable as ours. And so what happens is if you put a massive tariff there, people in the United States, if they want to manufacture it, they don't have to pay the tariff to sell it in the country. So they immediately become more competitive with other countries. And then the other part is other countries, right? I mean, they have a tariff. So those people they have a couple of different options. You can either send your product elsewhere, okay, if people won't buy it for the cost after tariff here, or you can lower your price in order to basically bring back down to the tariff level. So
we got the details, but
what
what I'm concerned about is just let's wrap this up a little, and just ask you one question. Okay, you sound to be making a high level argument that, okay, we understand that it would be nice to have more manufacturing in the United States. I don't think most, even people on the left, a lot of people would disagree with that. It is good to have manufacturing, especially for silicon
they just say
chips
it's
and so
impossible.
forth. Right. It's not impossible. But you are
I agree.
suggesting basically that, I think you're suggesting, but since we are the basically founders of globalization and the free market, this was by design. The American set up with its allies, set up this system, which has been incredibly
what system
lucrative,
specifically?
Globalization and free trade.
I would agree. So after World War II,
but we're the wealthiest country in the world. So I don't understand.
We used to be the wealthiest country in the world.
We still are the wealthiest country in the world, not
by
per
land
capita,
value, not by economy.
Not by per capita. By economy, we're still the most. China and us go back and forth, right?
You can debate those numbers.
Right,
Sure.
you can debate those numbers, but we still are powerful. So I don't understand the argument that I do understand the argument. Bring manufacturing back to the United States. That's great. We should be pushing that. But to unilaterally change one administration, without there being a massive world war or incredible changes to our economy. Now, there is coming. I do appreciate your fact for AI might be taking away service jobs and so forth in the future. That should be something.
It's going to. Right now, it's happening.
Yeah, there's a mass extinction event going on right now with jobs, no doubt about it. Yeah. But that's not what Trump doesn't know that. Trump is clueless when it comes to anything AI related.
Well, he's the person who first in 2015 said we should bring back manufacturing, and there were hundreds of millions of people who rallied and agreed with him. So I would say that he actually is aware of that.
Okay. Not real AI, but I understand that.
That's
that
it. That's
comment.
another argument that I typically see left-leaning people say is they essentially make the argument that Trump is this evil genius, and at the same time, he's a complete idiot. He's not a complete idiot, and so you have to actually give him the credit for some of these ideas. He's the first person who popularized these ideas in the American public. And
I always
ultimately, they're
say
very
that someone
popular
who
policies for a good
lies,
reason.
someone says something, whether you're an influencer and you say
All
something.
politicians lie, brother.
Yeah, but if you say something 50% of the time it's true, and something you say is accurate 50% of the time, but half of what you say is it's disaccurate, you have no character, right?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so if we want to debate the,
No, I don't actually
morals,
anymore.
don't
I
think
want to
that that's
actually
very-
go to some other callers. So I do really appreciate your viewpoints, but I want to try and keep these a little bit shorter. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, as someone pointed out in the comments, I am cognizant. I know this is my show, and I'm not trying to be rude by shutting people down. It's just that I'm trying to work on doing my system better of having 2 minutes, these conversations 2 minutes, so we can allow more perspectives. About 4 minutes ago, someone left a comment and said it's already 2 minutes, so I do appreciate that. I don't agree. I mean, I do agree manufacturing should come back to the country, and if you think Trump is actually doing that by having tariffs and changing free trade, the system that we set up, I would say there's much better ways to do that, to encourage manufacturing to come back to the States. You can do that in many different ways. It doesn't have to be tariffs. But if you believe that Trump is going to bring manufacturing back to the States, then maybe it will. If companies are willing to invest the enormous amount of money to build factories here again and find labor, which goes back to an immigration argument possibly, or maybe not, like coal miners in West Virginia that don't have coal jobs, they could certainly manufacture things and so forth. All right, so anyway, that's some random thoughts there. Jane Huram, you're up next. Again, we can try and keep it. I'm trying to keep you down to 2 minutes for your initial point. Then there'll be some quick banter thereafter, and we'll move on quicker so that these the guests, we stay a little bit more on topic and everything's a little bit more succinct. Hi, Jane.
Yes, I'm here. What I'm saying is, I do believe Trump has a point by saying bringing the manufacturing back, but we need to know from the beginning we did this to ourselves. But the only problem that we have is we have the rules of minimum wage and insurance for workers. So that is the determining factor, because they can manufacture an iPhone for maybe $5 or $10 in China, but if it comes here, the same iPhone has been manufactured at maybe $400 because of the way our laws are. We protect the employee, we protect the worker, which we have to keep that. We don't want to go back those days where even children are working. If you go to China today, which I have been there, you see they have like sleeping banks. They work 12 hours for $3 a day. So I don't know how we can do that, because even if we try to put the tariffs, still Apple will not come here because the manufacturing cost is just too high. They would rather pay that tariff and manufacture in China.
Yep, that's by design. The American free agreements with the rest of the world and making free trade a thing around the world is a system of trade that America has advocated for and set the rules up. So that's what.
So now what do we do?
Oh, there's a lot of things we could do. I don't think we want to go too deep on this live on that, because I wanted to know more like what is the outcome. What do you, if you're a MAGA supporter, what's the outcome, and what does America look like if we continue to head in this direction? So anyway, we talked a little bit about free trade. I appreciate your thoughts and your perspectives, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Again, doing my best, which is not very good at all, as you can tell. What do you think at the outcome? If you're MAGA, so next guest, if you can tell us where you sit on the political spectrum and what generation you are, and if we continue to get your way, if you happen to be MAGA, and if you're not MAGA, what do you think we're going towards? And how is your life better? Like, no one has answered that question yet. How is your life better if MAGA gets their way, MAGA stays in control? Like, the direction of the country now, I think the polls on both sides show that America's headed in the wrong direction economically. So I think that's a really important question. How is your life better if MAGA continues to get their way? So Shane Adams, RE, you're up next. And again, your generation and where you sit on the political spectrum, and that will give viewers a better perspective of where you're coming from. And it looks like Shane is not long on the live, so we'll move on. So if anyone wants to answer that question, I think it's really important. We've talked a lot about trade and other things, about Trump or MAGA, what they want. No one's talked about culture issues, which is strange because that's usually the thing that comes up first and foremost. That's a great point. Oh, yeah. They can't answer the question because it wasn't stated by any particular bro or broadcast that they can parrot. I wonder if there's some truth to that. Like, why isn't anyone answering the actual question? My thoughts are, if the only thing that MAGA wants is to own the libs, like, I think that's it. Again, as a fierce independent, it seems like to me that MAGA's number one mission is to own the libs. You've heard that saying over and over. So it's not to make their life better. It's not for anything other than, of course, maybe they're for the immigration or deporting immigrants and so forth, and maybe they think that makes their life better. That's fine. I don't think there's much. You're not going to get a lot of argument from me that if you're here illegally, that you should be here. Maybe there's different ways to how do we fix that, but I'm not going to argue those points. But that would be a valid point, I think, for someone that maybe they would argue that their life would be better if there were less immigrants. I'd love to hear that and explain to me why that is. But I really believe that their only thing is that because of divide and conquer, because of the top have gotten us to fight between left and right, that MAGA only gives a shit about owning the libs or winning. This ridiculous notion of winning. You think you're winning. No, compromise is winning. Winning each and every argument is not winning, or getting your way on each and every issue is not winning. It's actually losing. But they're doing such a great job. When I say they, I mean special interests, corporations, billionaires, people with political motives are doing an incredible job dividing America between these important issues. Yes, they're important, whether they're cultural issues or economic issues, security issues, whatever they may be, they're important. But they're more interested in making us fight against each other about these issues instead of realizing it's the corruption by the special interest billionaires and corporations, the lobbyists, even foreign governments, to maximize their power or to enrich themselves. Like that, to me, that's why I have this channel. This is why I appreciate you being here, joining, is to hammer it home, to realize, stop with the little infighting. We've talked about immigration on this live. We've talked about bringing manufacturing back to the country. Great. They're all good topics, but they're all misguided. They're all misguided topics because these are the things that we fight about, whether it's abortion or gun rights, whatever issue you have, these things are just meant to divide us so that the people at the top can maintain control, increase their control, enrich themselves, and that is the actual problem in America. It's the two-party system has been fully corrupted, blue and red, and just going back and forth between blue and red is not going to fix, or like I said here, it's not going to make your life better. There's only one thing that's going to make your life better, and that's eliminating corruption from government. That's going to make all of our lives better. But it seems like MAGA just wants to say, I want to own the libs. I want to feel like I won. It's like ego. It's just ego. It's not actually improving your own life. It's this tribal mentality, this cult-like mentality, and that's coming from a fierce independent. That's how I see it. So what division only see, that's right there. Stuttgart, what's the Stuttgart? What division only Dems are dividing? Oh, come on. You can't be serious. What a mindless comment is that? Both are dividing. If you look at every right-wing influencer, you don't think they're dividing. Like, I don't know what you're listening to, whether it was Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or Candace Owens, you name it. And there's plenty of people on the left as well that are doing the similar things. A lot of left-wing influencers or creators just bringing up issues and trying to bring their point. I was talking about Parker and the other individual, which I don't know why I'm losing, Dean Withers, who are just constantly trying to own MAGA or try to debate MAGA and say, well, how can you still support Trump? It's happening on that side too. So for someone to say in my comments, what division only Dems are dividing, like, you've lost your mind. You're just not sensible. If you can't realize that both sides, there's motives on both sides that have been trying to divide us. And that's the problem with the United States and our society. So I want to see if there's anyone else that wants to join and try and answer the question, because no one has answered the question directly. And I get it. We got sidetracked a little bit, but explain to me what America becomes and how your life is better if MAGA gets their way. I really want to know from someone that says MAGA, says, hey, this is why my life will be better. And if there are clear things that make your life better, great. Other than owning the libs, yeah, win what? Like, we're trying to have us a society with rules and a rules-based order with less corruption. So that's my thought. So hello, Dolly Lefa. He is the swamp. Wake up. I think that's applying to Trump. That's what's interesting. I often say as well is MAGA wants to drain the swamp or eliminate the deep state, and liberals want to prevent oligarchy. It's the same thing. Like, it's the same thing. It's people in power who are rich and powerful who are controlling our government. It's not normal workers that working for government agencies. That's not the swamp. That's not the deep state. That's not oligarchy. Oligarchy in the deep state are people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, and many other people that are trying to influence government and take down our democracy and just get us to fight with each other. Winning is not winning. Compromise is the only way we win. That was something that was much more, there's a lot less corruption. There was still corruption, but there's a lot less corruption, and there was more working together in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then since 9/11, things have really, especially 2008, things have really gotten out of hand with our division. And, then you have a comment like Eric Arcmenter blaming everything on Eric Soros. And then you have people on the left blaming everything on some other billionaire. Like, yeah, he's a problem too. Like, all the billionaires are trying to position themselves for more enrichment. Okay, so let's see if anyone wants to answer the question. We don't have anybody in the queue, but if anyone wants to answer questions, what do you explain to me what American becomes and how is your life better? You can join as a guest. You can hit the request button, which might be right about there, or you can hit it on the bottom of the screen on the pink and blue silhouette icon. You can join with video or just audio and video, or just audio. It's your choice. If anyone wants to answer that question, thanks for the likes and the badges. It helps expose the live to more people. And again, as we're waiting for someone to join, my channel, TK Civics, is all about trying to expose the reality or get people to take their heads out of the sand, stop arguing about individual issues, start realizing that the only thing that matters today is eliminating the corruption by special interests, billionaires and corporations, super PACs, from our government, and bringing representation back to the people. It doesn't matter what your issue is. Just bring the representation back to the people. Let regular Americans, and eliminate all career politicians, because being a politician is not supposed to be a career. It was supposed to be a temporary civic responsibility, not a career. And both of those things have to happen. And I have a plan to do exactly that. It may sound impossible. It's a big idea. It's right there. It's under the Fix America, tinyurl.com, TK Civics plan. Please follow. Please, I hope you watch some of my videos. And you'll notice that I won't necessarily bring up too many specific issues. I will judge people based on their character. And more importantly, I will always focus things back onto the real problems with our country, and that is corruption in our politics or corruption in our political system, and trying to eradicate that corruption from our political system. There is a way to do it. It's not impossible. It's actually pretty straightforward. It would require a lot of people, 50 to 70 million people, but I've had thousands of comments on my videos, tens of thousands of comments on my videos about people believing there's more than 50 to 70 million people from all sides of the political spectrum that would want to eliminate corruption from our political system. And if there were, and there's also 75 million people that vote that also are classified as independents because they're not affiliated with either the Republican or Democratic Party. So there's clearly enough people. But you're being conned, you're being manipulated into believing that you could only vote blue and red. And you can. Today, it is only possible to vote blue or red. But there is a way, there are many ways, actually. There's 4 different ways that I have listed in that plan that if we really wanted to, we could take our government back. And that applies to you, MAGA, and to you, liberals. It applies to everybody equally, that we can take our government back and bring it back to the representation for the people, by the people, if we really wanted to. And my argument is always that it has to be Gen Z, Gen Y, and Gen X. Those 3 generations, I would argue, haven't done anything significant to protect the American ideals, to protect American freedom, to protect American democracy, like every other generation or series of generations has had to do in the past, all the way from the founding through the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the 2 world wars, the Civil Rights era, etc. Every group of generations has done something to move America forward, but not my generation, not millennials, and not Gen Z. And Gen Z are just getting started, but they're going to be an important part of this. So if we want to do that, that's what's going to have to happen. So I see a lot of people like that comment is America's great and so is MAGA, blah, blah, blah. But, they don't want to jump on. No one wants to jump on and says, how does your life actually get better if you get your way? And that's the question for today's live. No one has been able to answer that question. How is your life better if you get your way? If you believe it's immigration or manufacturing, those are 2 topics that we've talked about today. But no one's really answered the question, how does your life get better if MAGA gets their way? So that's my thoughts there. Still waiting to see if someone wants to join and answer that question. And let's see, because every generation passes the buck to the next all. Why ask what's wrong with the youth? Yeah, it's not a bad comment. I would also say that after about 3 or 4 generations, after something really bad happens, like the last cataclysmic sort of event in the world has been World War II, and where we fought against fascism and we fought against fascists taking over the world, or communists, both. They were both competing to take over the world over in Europe. And we, of course, were a democracy. And United States and its allies won that battle to not eradicate, but fight against fascism and fight against communism. And we won that battle. And it just seems like now at the 4th generation after World War II, the 3rd and 4th generations after something happens, people forget. People forget how bad things can be. They just think that things won't change and get that bad again. And there's a reason that our founding fathers called democracy an experiment, because it is not an experiment. It is an experiment, and it has to be continued to evolve, and you have to continue to fight for it. You have to continue fighting for their freedoms. You can never just let up and say, we're done. We've set up the perfect government and think that it's not going away. No, every 3rd or 4th generation after something like a world event has happened, and it could be a localized event for you if you're in a smaller country and something happened, it seems like after the 3rd or 4th generation, they forget, and they just sort of relax and don't protect their ideals. And that's what's happening now with millennials, I believe, and Gen X millennials, and even Gen Z, is they think that, hey, we have a lot of stuff. We have a lot of freedoms. We are living a pretty good life. Not everybody feels like that, of course. And they think that things can't get that bad. Well, they certainly can, and they will, unless people fight for it. So that's why I always say is we have to fight for it. And when I say fight, it doesn't mean violence. It just means doing the right things. It means organizing. And again, you can follow that plan, that link. You can go to that link. Please read that and like that article if you think it's viable, no matter how difficult you think it will be to happen. I don't view things in a negative lens or a pessimistic lens. I always view things in an optimistic lens. And if there are 50 to 70 million people, and I will scream it from the rooftops for however many years it takes to tell people, if you're sick of this blue versus red shit, and you're tired of being divided, and you're tired of arguing with one another over these issues that are important but aren't nearly as important as the corruption, then there's a way to solve it. And it may take me years, maybe it'll never happen. But the one thing I know is I won't live with regret, saying that I've tried to do something. I've tried to let people take their heads out of the sand, hopefully in a constructive way, to realize you don't have to vote blue or red. Right now you do, but eventually you wouldn't have to vote that way. So that's my thoughts as I continue to talk about, the types of things that I always sort of like to talk about and preach on TK Civics. Again, if you haven't followed me here on my channel to watch all my videos, please do so. All I ask most people to do is give me 5 minutes a week, give me 30 minutes a week, give me 2 minutes a week. Just put your head in civics a little bit, because civics is the way to impact politics. If we're not involved in civics, and democracy, a healthy democracy requires people to be involved in civics. And civics is not boring. Civics is actually really interesting, and it's cool, and it affects your life like nothing else in the world does. If you just pay attention to civics a little bit, you can change your life through politics. And it starts with civics. And it doesn't mean you having to join some organization or to do grassroots stuff. No, it just means to be aware, realize you're being manipulated by so many forces on social media and on traditional media and by billionaires, corporations, special interests, which own all media. Basically, you have the 5 richest guys right now, the 5 richest white men that own the majority of media and social media today. And it's really scary, because not only do they have the most money, they also have the most influence through their media outlets. And now they're also using that money and their influence to take over government. And the government is supposed to be a representation of the people, not a representation of a few billionaires. And that's what's happening right now. And people don't realize it. So they have the 5 wealthiest men have, is it close to $2 trillion now? I think it's close to $2 trillion. They own TikTok. Well, they're going to control TikTok. They do control Facebook and Instagram. And of course, TikTok is, like I said, and they do control many media outlets throughout the country. So that's what's happening. And Miranda, it's the truth, cry snowflakes. I always laugh when I see these ridiculous things that people just repeat, like snowflake, you're a snowflake. Like, come on, like, grow up. Adolescent shit right there. Calling people snowflakes, you're just repeating some derogatory term to make people seem inferior. That's why it has to be a big government. So there's no big government and small government. It's the right size government that represents the people the best. Small government ideally would be better because it would be less cost, but you have to have, we're 340 million people with a $5 trillion economy. People who think government is the problem and not the solution, and that's poison. That's people have been thinking about. You should always be skeptical of government. You should always challenge your government. But to believe that government needs to just get out of the way is it's not true. There has to be the right balance, because people don't like regulations, but without regulations, when you crash your car, you die. When you build your house, it burns down. Regulations impact every single thing, or government impacts every single thing you do. Even what I'm doing right now, which is breathing the air and drinking water. That government impacts the water that you drink, the air that you breathe, the schools that you go to, the hospitals that you can attend, the roads that you drive on. Government is everywhere. And you only can have either bad government and you have bad people, or if you want more effective government, you have better people representing you. It's really that simple. It's not complicated. It's that simple. People like to demonize government. Again, you should always be skeptical of government. You should always challenge your government. But to demonize it is really demonizing society, because the only thing that you have and that we have as a society to protect ourselves is government. So you have a choice. Do you want government that's representing us as people, or corporations, billionaires, or special interests, which that's where we are now, a corporatocracy, or do you want it representing us? And if you have it representing us and you have decent people with moral integrity in government, then you will have better government and your life will be directly impacted. And so if you're Gen Z, you're young, you haven't been around politics that long, you see a lot of it in social media. You're still trying to make heads or tails out of a lot of information because you're being overwhelmed with information and you're being manipulated and exploited by everybody for various monetary reasons, usually monetary reasons. And you need to be aware of that. And I know things are confusing at times, and you can easily get drawn into on this side or on that side. You have to realize it's not left or right, it's top versus bottom. It's the haves versus the have-nots. It's the rich versus the weak, and people who are economically poor, the rich versus the poor. And that's where this is. This is top down. So if I had to say where do I stand, left or right? No, I stand at the bottom. I stand with all of you that we need to be punching up and pushing back against the people that are trying to steal our democracy, steal, exploit us, and enrich themselves and take away our constitutional freedoms. So let's see if there's anyone else in the chat. So if anyone wants to answer this question, MAGA, what do you think the outcome will be of America if you get your way? Explain to me what America becomes and how your life is better. Seriously, I want to know. If there's one more caller that wants to, or one more guest that wants to join, we'll give you 2 minutes to let me know. Doesn't have to be someone from MAGA. Ideally, it would be better, but I'd like to know where you sit on the political spectrum and what your generation is. And if you are in favor of some of the things that are happening, just tell me. How does it make your life better? Or are you just trying to own the lips, like somehow say, see, I won, like some sort of, game? Is this some sort of game? I don't know. But we had some nice callers earlier, and there's been a ton of comments. And again, reminder, please follow, like, and send any likes or badges or whatever TikTok does. It helps get this information out. And I know I've had a lot of tremendous support in comments from people and DMs from people that say they appreciate sort of this perspective from a fierce independent and the constant trying to make people aware or hammering it home that we need to eliminate corruption from government by special interest billionaires and corporations, because that's the only way we solve and make the world a better place. And I certainly want to do so for my children and for the future generations, to be afforded the same types of opportunities that those of us that lived through this 80s and 90s and those of you lived before there was so much more opportunity and optimism in the world, and we had still tons of problems, but nothing like what's happening today.